So this story begins in a room that was completely filled with trash. The window panes were so dirty that no light could get inside. That's why the room was really dark. Besides that, garbage-like items were scattered everywhere. We see various calendar pages on the walls, with certain dates marked. Actually, a guy named Usro lived in this disgusting, messy room. After failing to get into college, he had isolated himself from everyone. He lived alone in his room, constantly thinking about something or other all day. He didn't even talk to his parents. One day, as he lay in his trash-filled room, contemplating something, he suddenly made the biggest decision of his life. He decided to commit suicide. However, when he tried to hang himself with a belt, attaching it to the wall, the belt couldn't handle his weight, and the wall eventually broke, falling on him. As Usro, upset, tried to get up, his eyes caught a glimpse of light. He saw that a gap had formed in the wall due to the break, and light was coming through it from his neighbor's room. After seeing this light, he went to the gap and tried to see his neighbor. That's when he saw his beautiful neighbor, Rio. Rio was incredibly beautiful. He was captivated the moment he saw her, and he stared at her intently. After that, Usro started watching Rio every day. However, Rio didn't notice the gap because it was behind her bookshelf. So Usro, completely mesmerized, watched her daily. One day, he saw Rio getting ready and leaving with books. He then realized that Rio probably went to college. At that time, he was eating the last of his food at home, which consisted of some cheap snacks. After observing Rio for a long time, Usro realized that she didn't have any friends. She only went out for her studies and then came back home. However, one day, as he was watching her through the gap, Rio suddenly disappeared. After waiting for a long time, Usro finally left his room after many days to find out where Rio had gone. He put his ear to Rio's door, trying to hear if anyone was inside. But when he didn't hear any sound, he tried to check through the door's peephole to see if anyone was there. While he was doing this, another girl saw him from a distance. This girl's name was Haruko Kawasaki. Haruko had come to visit her brother, who lived on the floor below, bringing him food. However, after knocking for a long time and her brother not opening the door, she hung the food on the doorknob and left. Just then, Usro smelled the food and thought there might be good food in the package. So, he took the food out of the package and started eating. However, Rio was watching his strange behavior from a distance. After a brief conversation, Rio learned that Usro was actually her neighbor. So she even offered to have lunch with him. Later, while Rio was preparing food, Usro thoroughly checked the wall in his room. Finally, he found the gap through which he used to watch Rio in her room. Afterward, as they were eating the food Rio had prepared, Rio told him that they shouldn't just eat here, but should also go out to eat somewhere. Hearing this, Usro became very happy. After finishing their meal, he returned to his room. From then on, Usro went to Rio's room almost every day to eat with her. However, he still didn't stop watching Rio through that hole. Then, one day, as he was eating with Rio, he asked her, "Why are you spending time with a loser like me? I dropped out of school, and I don't have a good job." Rio then told him, "Because we've developed a really good connection in a very short time by talking to each other, and that's a big deal for me." However, these words touched Usro's heart, so he quickly finished his meal and rushed back to his room. Once there, he finally decided that he would no longer spy on Rio through that gap, so he covered the gap with paper. Then one night, a storm started, and it was raining heavily. Usro was bored sitting in his room and was looking for an excuse to remove the paper from the hole. But then, he suddenly heard Rio's door open. So he removed the paper and looked through the gap into Rio's room. He saw Rio wearing a raincoat, and she had a knife in her hand. A moment later, a guy in a suit came up behind her. And as soon as he tried to touch Rio from behind, Rio used her martial arts skills to easily overpower the guy, cut his throat with a knife, and killed him right there. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she was laughing loudly. After seeing all this, Usro got really scared, so he bumped hard against the wall. And then, a book fell from Rio's bookshelf, which made everything go dark for Usro, meaning he couldn't see anything in Rio's room anymore. However, then a mysterious van arrived. Some people got out of the van, took some things, and went straight into Rio's room. Actually, they had come to take the body and clean up all the evidence. Meanwhile, Asro in his room couldn't understand how Rio could kill a person. He was trying to believe what he had seen. But then, someone knocked on his door. He saw Rio, who had changed her clothes and was wearing a nice dress, bringing him food, and she had a sweet smile on her face. She asked Asro, "Can I sometimes eat in your room too? I'll just clear a little space and sit in your room." After they started eating, Asro saw that Rio was eating very calmly. However, Asro still couldn't believe that Rio could kill a person. And here, Rio told him, "After spending so many years alone, I started doubting myself. That's why now, when I spend time with you, I feel like a normal person again." Saying this much, she finished her meal and left. The next night, Asro used his chopsticks to knock down the book that was in front of the hole. And when the book fell, he could clearly see everything in Rio's room. He saw Rio sitting and drinking tea. After seeing this, he thought that maybe everything was normal and what he had seen last night was just his imagination. However, just then, he heard someone's voice at Rio's door, saying goodbye to Rio and leaving. So Asro ran and opened his door to see who was saying goodbye and leaving. He saw a girl named Maggie. When she saw Asro standing at the door, she turned around, looked at Asro, called his name, and left without saying anything else. However, Asro was scared after seeing this. Then, the next morning, when Rio left for college, she saw Asro trying to wash his clothes. So Rio told Asro, "You can wash your clothes in my washing machine if you want." And she offered to have dinner together that night and left. However, afterward, while Asro was washing clothes, he remembered the murder scene. But now that he had started to like Rio, he didn't want to believe this at all. He felt that all these things were his imagination. And since Rio had offered to have dinner that night, he quickly came home, cleaned the room thoroughly, and set up a table. However, just then, he heard Rio's door open. So when he checked through the gap, he saw Rio entering the room with a man. And this man had a B tattoo on his hand. When this man tried to touch Rio from behind, just like before, Rio used her martial arts skills to first beat him up thoroughly, and then, laughing, she cut his throat. After seeing this, Asro got really scared, and he clearly understood that the previous incident was not an illusion. Actually, Rio invited people to her room, cut their throats, and killed them. After seeing this, Asro got very scared, which made him start screaming. And just then, Rio's attention went to the hole in the wall. So Rio put her knife into the hole. However, Asro managed to save himself somehow. Then, she stared at Asro through that hole. However, Asro, terrified, ran out of his room and tried to escape from there. But Rio, with a knife in hand, ran after Asro, following him. Asro exited through the emergency gate and somehow reached the roof of a wall. However, Rio ran onto the roof and cornered Asro against the wall. Then, Rio asked Asro, "Did you see me kill someone?" Asro then admitted, "Yes, I saw you kill before, and I knew everything beforehand." However, after hearing this, Rio was a little impressed. She thought, "This guy knew everything beforehand. Still, he came to have dinner with me." Then, just as Rio moved forward to kill Asro, Asro told her that he had actually tried to commit suicide one day. But then he had seen that gap in the wall, through which he had seen Rio. After seeing her, he had fallen in love with her. He felt that spending his whole life with Rio might be a much better decision than dying. However, when he later found out that Rio was a killer, his heart was broken again. After that, Asro knelt down, closed his eyes, and prepared himself for death. However, when Rio came in front of him with the knife, she pointed the knife at his throat. But when she saw that Asro wasn't moving, she didn't kill him. And she asked him, "How do you feel now?" Asro then told her, "I want to be in a relationship with you." After hearing this, Rio agreed, and she started licking the blood from Asro's lips. And when Asro tried to kiss her, Rio stopped him. And she told him, "You should continue spying, just like you were doing before." Then, the next morning, Haruko finally came and met her brother, Kawasaki. And she told him to fix his relationship with their parents, because their parents were very worried. Then, as she was leaving after giving him food, she saw Asro on the upper floor. So she quickly said good morning to him and left. After that, Asro went into Rio's room and started washing his clothes in her washing machine. Then, as they were eating, Rio checked the gap thoroughly and was surprised at how Usro could see everything so clearly through such a small gap. Usro first apologized to her and said that he would close the gap. However, Rio told him not to close it. After that, Usro was very excited, thinking about how he could be dating such a beautiful girl like Rio. And then he told Rio that he liked everything about her. And after hearing this, Rio blushed a little. Then Usro told her that he wanted to spend his whole life with Rio. So, if necessary, he would even find a job. After that, he also got a job at a small store. However, every time he used a cutter to open a package, he remembered that Rio had used this cutter to kill 2 people. But still, since he loved Rio, he ignored those things. Now, when he returned home at night, he saw that Rio was already sitting by the hole, waiting for him. And here, when they talked, Usro felt that it would be better if they were in the same room tonight. However, Rio directly refused him. She said, "Since we are in a relationship now, it wouldn't be convenient for us to be in the same room at night." Then she invited him to her college the next day. However, when Usro came to college the next day, he found out that Rio had invited him to college only to bring the microwave because the one there was broken. Actually, since Usro had spent many years alone, he now started feeling uncomfortable around people. Especially in this college area, he felt very awkward. However, when Rio proudly told her friends that Usro was her boyfriend, Usro forgot everything and started acting normally again. After that, during lunch, Usro started watching Rio intently, and he was thinking that he was probably the first guy Rio was dating. And then he told her that he actually wanted to change himself for Rio. He would take the exam again next year and start his life anew because he couldn't imagine his future without Rio. And hearing all these things, Rio was a little happy. She thought, well, there's someone in the world who's trying to make himself worthy of me. However, when Usro told her, "I will completely change myself to have you," Rio told him, "I am a killer. I have no desire whatsoever to change myself." After that, when they were on the street, Rio asked Usro if he wanted any food. Then Rio told him, "Actually, I haven't killed anyone in a long time." Saying this, they started walking towards the restaurant. Although everything seemed normal, Rio suddenly put on her raincoat, and she grabbed a woman on the street, cut her throat, and splattered blood on the wall. However, after seeing this, Usro got very scared, and he looked away. However, Rio asked him, "Are you scared?" After that, whenever they went on a date, Rio would start killing people one by one. She now started publicly killing people on the street. One day, Usro asked Rio, "Do you just randomly choose people to kill?" Rio then said, "No, I have a list of criminals. I choose my targets from that list." So Usro asked her, "Should I assume you deliver justice to people?" Then they both chuckled a little. However, since Rio was still killing people, Usro very quickly and clearly understood that he absolutely didn't like seeing murders firsthand. So he decided to ignore them. And Usro also noticed that there were never any news reports in newspapers about missing persons or murders concerning the people Rio killed. Then, the next day, Usro met his neighbor Kawasaki, and they both started talking about cats, how good animals cats are. After that, when Usro came to the park to meet Rio, he saw Rio from a distance and started thinking, how can such a beautiful girl kill people so brutally? Actually, he had fallen in love with Rio. That's why he wasn't noticing Rio's bad sides. He was only with her based on her good qualities and her cuteness. Then they both sat in the park and started eating chocolate-flavored ice cream. And after seeing this, Rio was a little happy because she thought, finally, Usro bought something, thinking about them. Now, Usro's life was slowly changing. He had both a job and money. One day, when he was sitting at the cash register, Haruko came to buy some food. However, Usro gave her the food without taking money from her because he had once stolen food from her. So now he was feeling guilty. Then, returning home that night, Usro started calling for Rio. However, Rio wasn't making any sound. So when he checked through the gap, he saw that a note had been written for him, telling him to be home at 10 p.m. So he took a shower and got his bed ready and sat down, because it was already 10 p.m. by then. And when he checked through the gap, he saw Rio had tied their neighbor Kawasaki to the bed. Actually, Rio had kidnapped him and brought him here. After seeing this, Usro was completely shocked. So he started begging Rio not to kill Kawasaki. However, Rio told him to shut up. But Usro tried to explain to her that killing an innocent person was wrong. However, Rio told him, just sit quietly so we don't get caught. Then, without listening to Asro, she killed Kawasaki right there. A little later, the girl named Maggie came into Rio's room, cleaned everything, took the body, and left. And after seeing all this, Asro clearly understood why the murders Rio committed never made it into the newspapers. After that, Asro came into Rio's room and asked Maggie, "What's actually going on?" Maggie then told him, "I can't tell if you're stupid or smart. Why are you still having trouble understanding that even after so many murders, the police can't catch Rio? That means she's a professional killer who kills without making any mistakes. Besides, my team's job is just to clean up the place and make the body disappear." Then she ordered her team to cut Kawasaki's body into pieces because his body was already in bad shape. Then she told Asro, "Actually, these bodies are sold in various black markets. People buy fresh dead bodies because the organs of fresh dead bodies can still be extracted and used." After that, when Asro asked about Rio, Maggie said she probably went to eat something because she gets hungry after every murder. However, Asro then asked Maggie, why was Kawasaki killed? He was innocent. But then Maggie took him to Kawasaki's room. After that, Maggie told him, Kawasaki only kept cats and took care of them to show people. But actually, he brutally tortured the cats. And then Maggie also warned Asro, now it might be your turn to die, because Rio only hangs out with people to kill them. Falling in love or making friends is never possible for her. Now, the next morning, when Asro was lying in his room, Rio came and knocked on the door. But Asro didn't open the door, so Rio got very worried. And she jumped from the balcony into Asro's room. However, Asro told her that he was sick, so he wouldn't get out of bed. So Rio lay down next to him. However, Asro then told her, killing people is wrong. This is not right at all. But Rio asked him, are you more worried this time because the person I killed is someone you know? Asro said, no, actually Kawasaki was already a very bad person. I don't feel any pity for him. However, there should be a rule for every action. But Rio asked him, who actually decides this rule? Who lives and who dies? Every country has a law, so there's no such thing as real justice. However, Asro then told her, I don't want you to kill anyone else, because I can't watch it anymore. However, after hearing this, Rio got extremely angry and left. Although Asro still loved Rio, and he knew he could never leave her. After that, the next day, Asro met Haruko. And Haruko asked Asro if he had seen her brother. However, Asro tried to leave without saying anything. But Haruko asked him, actually, I wanted to know if you've seen my brother? Has he gone somewhere out to study? Because he hasn't called or messaged. However, just then Rio arrived and got extremely angry seeing them talking. Meaning, she was feeling very jealous. So, she asked Asro, who are you talking to? However, after seeing this, Asro got very scared, and he quickly sent Haruko away from there. He told her, if I get any information, I'll definitely let you know. You should leave quickly. After that, when Asro came to eat with Rio, he was very scared. He felt that if Haruko later came and uncovered the whole truth, then Rio might kill Haruko too. And when he saw Rio silent, he got even more scared. So he asked her, will you kill Haruko too? Rio then said, if I kill everyone, my reputation will be ruined. She promised Asro that she would never kill Haruko. The next day, Haruko messaged Asro, asking if they could meet to talk about her brother. Now Asro was thinking whether to reply to the message or not. Just then, a person in a black jacket came and pulled him into a car. Actually, it was the girl named Maggie. She threatened him, saying, if you don't behave, Rio will kill you. And then she told Asro that Haruko was looking for her brother. However, Maggie then told him, don't need to worry about that. However, before letting him go, she also told him, although you won't be useful to us alive, you'll be useful to us as a dead body. After that, Asro went and met Haruko at a restaurant. Here, Haruko proposed to Asro once again, and she told him that she truly loved him from the bottom of her heart. However, Asro made it clear to her, I was only helping you find your brother. I don't love you. However, after hearing this, Haruko was also completely shocked because Asro himself had once told her that Rio was trying to use him and would probably use him his whole life and would never truly love him. However, before leaving, Haruko told him, if you want, we can meet tomorrow too. After that, as Usro was returning home, a black car came in front of him. He thought it might be the girl named Maggie. However, it was actually the gang members. They grabbed Usro and forcibly took him to their hideout. And here, they started threatening him, telling Usro to convince Rio to work for them. But when Usro refused them directly, they cut Usro's cheek. And when he returned home with this cut cheek, Rio got very angry after seeing it, and she tried to go and take revenge on them. However, Usro stopped her and tried to explain to her. He said, "Actually, I don't want you to kill anyone else for me." However, Rio told him, "Killing is my job. I grew up doing this job." However, Usro told her, "You can show a little mercy and be a little more humane." Then he proposed to her again. He said, "I truly love you very much." However, Rio refused him, saying, "You don't know me well yet, so such a relationship can never happen between us." Saying this, she rejected him and quickly left. After that, the next day, Maggie came to Usro's store to meet him. And pretending to buy ice cream from him, she told him that Rio would be killing people on a very large scale soon. After hearing this, Usro was completely shocked. However, Maggie also told him, "Your relationship with her has become very deep." After that night, Usro heard sounds coming from Rio's room. So when he went and checked through the gap, he saw Rio killing someone. However, this time, instead of laughing like before, she was crying loudly. So Usro understood that the gang members were probably forcing her to do this. And he also understood that he probably couldn't live without Rio. So he called Haruko and directly refused her. He told her that he didn't want to meet her anymore. And he himself ran to meet the gang members. And here, he tried to explain to them to spare Rio's life. However, when the gang directly refused him, he started beating the gang members. But the gang members caught him and beat him up thoroughly. Just as their leader was about to hit him, the whole room suddenly went dark. And Rio came into the room and sprayed a gas that made everyone unconscious. Then she caught each of the gang members one by one and killed them. She even cut the leader's throat. After that, Rio helped Usro a little. And she explained to him, "Although I don't like killing people at all anymore, I still won't stop, because this is my job." After that, Rio proposed to Usro, and they both started kissing. But just then, Rio suddenly stabbed Usro in the stomach with a knife. And then, laughing, she told him, "I always wanted to kill someone who loved me." However, she very quickly realized that she wasn't getting the happiness she had hoped for by doing this. So she became quite upset, and Usro, after seeing all this in his injured state, started laughing. But a little later, he also fell unconscious. After that, we see a scene a few days later. We see Rio going somewhere with a bag, and Usro was going with her injured. Actually, they both decided to fix their old room and live together. And after seeing all this, Maggie, laughing, told them, "Actually, Usro should always keep spying and see what Rio is actually doing." However, Rio told her, "Although I won't kill anyone from now on, one day I might even kill Usro." And after hearing this, Usro, laughing, said, "Okay, you can do it if you want, because the blood in my body is your blood anyway." However, then they suddenly remembered that they had never formally introduced themselves to each other. So Rio extended her hand and said, "My name is Rio." And he said, "My name is Usro." And such an interesting point, this movie ends here.